for that. It's almost like going to Hilton University.
Yeah.
Here, you pay to actually train the people that you're going to pay.
But let me explain to you what I mean by building human capacity.
Yes.
Building human capacity is, Mark, if I touch your life and I educate you, I expect you to do the same when you go home. I expect you to do the same when you meet your friends, because that's the value chain I'm talking about. Right? It's the extension of what we can offer people down the line. So when we do a learning center in our group, the learning center's task is not just to train our people, but we actually go to the homes. You say, take me to your house, Mark. Who's your wife? Who are your kids?
But why do you do that?
Because it's important that they educate their kids to grow for the future. Right? And it's also giving an opportunity. If you don't give people an opportunity to learn, you stay where you are. In fact, you go backwards. So if we are to move as a country going forward, this value chain has to move down the line. So apart from educating our staff directly, we go to the homes and say, how can we help your children? Because you need to have educated and skilled children. And when I say education, it's not just theoretical education, but there's so much to do in terms of vocational skills. And like I said, I'm a believer that Nigeria actually needs to lean more towards vocational skills. Most of the government officials here will send their children abroad to school. But how many people can do that here? How many people can actually send their children abroad? In fact, they are struggling to send their children to schools in Nigeria itself.
Yes.
Right? So we need to fill that gap. Right? Otherwise, we'll just go backward and backward and backward. Whereas a country like India has moved forward. A country like Indonesia has moved forward. You go to Korea, literacy rate is 94%. In Singapore, it's 100%. The reason is it's compulsory education. From the time you are 5 years old until you are 18 years old, you have to go to school. The parents are penalized if you don't send your kids to school. Right? And when you're 18 in Singapore, if you're a male, you have to go and serve in the army for 2 years. Right? So it's a value chain because Singapore government 40 years ago, 50 years ago thought about this. What do we need to do? Because all Singapore had were people.
Yes.
We have no land, we have no oil, we have
the
no...
will of the people that built Singapore.
And I again reiterate, leadership. Right? It's what the leadership of the country wanted at the time.
Why don't you think they're doing it then? I mean, we know, something comes to mind that we are living in a very fast-moving world where things are changing so quickly, technology is changing things so quickly. My worry is that even if we do reach towards these vocational training and we start to supercharge our people and their education and their abilities, we're actually preparing them for a world that by the time we do it is going to go. For example, I'll give you an example. Google Cars is what comes to mind. Google is creating a car that can drive by itself. It's already doing tests. What that will then do is that's going to eliminate millions of jobs around the world where you drive. So if you drive a tractor in a farm, it won't be needed anymore. The tractor will drive itself. If you drive, if you're a driver, you won't need, it's almost like you disappear. That's one example. There's many examples that technology is changing profoundly, low-skilled jobs in particular. The vocational skills tend to often go for medium or low-term jobs. How do we avoid getting ourselves caught in a trap where we're preparing for a future that doesn't exist by the time we get there?
It's going to be a huge challenge, in my opinion, because the way technology is moving forward, Mark, is incredible. You just mentioned this, and there's just so many sectors. That's why the example you gave of India, of what they did in the IT sector is very important. But if you look at the skills in Nigeria, for example, right, IT skills, we have a very high level of IT skills. Okay, and I'm talking about self-learned IT skills. These are not trained IT skills. Because the ability for us to understand IT is not difficult.
Yes.
For my age it's difficult, but for the younger generation, it's a much easier thing to, 2-year-old kids now are holding iPads.
Yes.
Right? And you give them a phone, they know how to use it very well. But people have the ability to learn if you give them the tools. Right? So a 2-year-old kid learns to use an iPad because you give them an iPad. So the same thing happened here in Nigeria. We learned that people have a lot of skills. But the challenge of how do we face when IT overtakes the world, I really don't have an answer at the moment, Mark, because it's a game changer.
Let's talk about Africa. You'll notice on the Quramo logo, big logo with Lagos right there in the middle. I think that part of our solution, both in Nigeria and Africa, is to start to work trade amongst ourselves. And this is not just trade goods, but also trade services and people.
The challenges in doing business in Africa, Mark, is that government says one thing, does a different thing. So when you talk about ECOWAS, everybody says ECOWAS works.
Yes.
But really, does it work? Try going to the border. Try shipping a container from here to Ghana. You have so many roadblocks.
Exactly.
Okay?
And visas and all the rest of it.
And not only that, that makes the cost of business expensive.
Very high, yeah.
So we can never compete.
So we need regional integration in order to, and that would actually supercharge services and education as well, because if then it would open up the entire market to a graduate or someone with some skills.
Sure.
You no longer confined to Nigeria, you'd be able to work anywhere else.
Anyway.
This is what the African Union is trying to do, but I think the private sector needs to be more involved in this argument, the push towards regional integration.
We tried.
Yeah, the statistics are shocking as well. In Europe, the amount of trade that is done in Europe, the amount of the intra-regional European trade is 60% of the trade that is done in Europe. In Americas, it's 40%. In Africa, it's 12%. So it's extremely low. So there's a huge opportunity for Africa to trade with Africa, not just products, but also people and ideas and services. Oh, go on.
No, I was just going to say the same thing happened in Europe, the European Union, how they function so well. ASEAN, all the ASEAN countries have all got together and said it's free trade now. But to do that, it took them 15 to 20 years, Mark. It wasn't a one-day job. So now, within ASEAN, as an ASEAN citizen, you can travel anywhere within ASEAN without visas. So, frankly, for me, as Africans, we should be able to travel to our countries.
Oh, Ghana just did it, actually. I don't know if you know this, but Ghana just actually made it so that you, me, all of us with a Nigerian passport can actually go in without getting a visa. The first country in West Africa to do so.
As a Singaporean, I can go to Ghana without visa, but I can't come to Nigeria without visa.
Aliko Dangote once told me that it was easier for a foreigner than him to actually go around Africa to do business.
That's
he
very
had
true.
38 visas, and he's the richest man in the world in a private jet. If he can't get it, then what hope is it for the rest of us? Now, before I ask a few more questions, I think it would be right for me to open it up to the third panelist, which is you, to maybe ask some questions of Haresh and see, because I know that there will be some. Now, if you do ask your question, I don't know if there's a mic, so you'll have to project, I guess. Stand up, just tell me your name, what you do, and what your question is, and I guess make your question shorter than the answer. So, who's first? Madame, representing the ladies, that's good.
My name is Ijoma, Dr. Ijoma Wagu with Lagos Business School. Being a university-based center, we work with young people in the University of Lagos, young people across the board. What's shocking on that angle, on the side of education providers, is how much young people don't know about what's going on in the workplace. So my question is how, yes, the private sector can provide good models and show leadership in this space of addressing the unemployment challenge, but how is that going to happen on a systematic level? Do you have any thoughts around that?
Thanks for telling us about what the group does, Gemma. But like I said, this needs to be replicated. If you remember, Lagos Business School sent a lot of your students to Singapore for learning, and I think we had about 4 batches that went from Lagos Business School to Singapore to on an exchange program where you actually exchange. And what we did in Singapore was we provided all the research, all the experiences that we had to all the colleagues from Lagos Business School to bring back here to try and use that information. So that's one of the ways that we go about trying to do this, right, is to get people to interact and spread the word. But private sector needs to do more. In my opinion, there are a lot of big conglomerates out here that needs to do more. It's not just about profit and making dollars, it's profits in terms of how do you get your skilled people to grow within society. Otherwise, they stay where they are. But it's a huge challenge. You know, it's a combination of things, right? It's also government policies, it's putting dedicated resources. And I say resources, it's not just about money, it's also putting people behind it and putting the right people behind it. So we learned that over time, over the last 15 years that we created our learning center, we had to change people a few times because we needed to get the right people to teach the right things. So it's not just about getting a qualified person and say, oh, you have a degree from a best university, they're the best person. No, it's through experience and learning that we found that who has the best skills to pass on the skills.
My name is Samuel Lariwaju. I'm with the Sustainability School, Lagos. If there is one thing from the policy function you in terms of assistance from the public sector that you think will assist the private sector in best catalyzing these issues, what would you think that policy statement should be?
I think it's a commitment more than anything else. Okay, it's not just about leadership. It's really a commitment that you need to put into practice.
Is it a policy revolution we're looking at, or is it just, an overhaul?
I think government makes a lot of statements and policies about wanting to do things right, Mark, but they don't do it. That's the bottom line. It's about doing what you say. Right? A lot of times when you go up there, we have taken delegations from Nigeria to various countries in Asia. We've taken them to Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and say, this is the education system we have in place in these countries, and this is the model. They get very excited, they want to do things, but when they come back, it's not implemented. And we go up there and we challenge them and say, listen, you came all the way down there, why don't you implement at least part of it? Again, for the lack of better word, you're hanging on to a seat that you don't know how long you're going to be sitting there on, so there's very difficulty in terms of sustaining policies. So before one can implement one policy, there's another person coming and saying, I have a different idea.
That is a problem across the board in Nigeria.
Yes.
Succession for policies. That's what the Indians did well.
Yes.
Every 5 years they renewed their education system since 1968.
Mm.
And no matter which government was in, picked up the mantle and took it forward. And that's how they evolved to the level they are. The opposite is the case in Nigeria.
All of us in this country, whether it's government or private sector, we have to speak the same language. We have to understand what needs to be done. Then we can achieve a cooperation between public and government.
The Quramo Conference, it is much more than a talk shop. Previous editions of this conference have achieved many things. In 2010, the theme of the conference was Knowledge Creates Wealth. That conference gave birth to a draft bill on the civil forfeiture of assets, which was shared with the then Speaker of Nigeria's House of Representatives in 2011, Right Honorable Aminu Tambuwal. In 2012, the theme of the conference was the Global Commonwealth. It focused on the recovery of stolen wealth to public coffers and solutions to addressing contentious energy issues, creating a knowledge economy, amongst others. That conference in 2012 gave birth to this venue where we are, the Lagos Court of Arbitration, which is established and recognized as an international center for arbitration in West Africa. In 2015, the Quramo Conference held on Earth Day, that's Wednesday, the 22nd day of April, and the theme was Solutions for a Sustainable Future. That conference brought together stakeholders to discuss and initiate actions relevant to capacitating and strengthening private sector initiatives and contributions to growing a circular economy for Lagos and for Nigeria. The 2015 conference also gave birth to the School of Sustainability in Lagos and Resource Information Network. They support development of capacity on sustainability issues. So now 6 members of the panel for the policy discussion. Desola Igaga, Country Representative, City and Guilds. Folabi Imokwede, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Job Creation in the Office of the Vice President. Dr. Chukuma Ezedima holds a PhD in Agricultural Economics. He's worked with IITA, Food and Agric Organization of the UN, FAO, and has consulted for the African Development Bank. Katerina Botolusi, the founder and creative director of Finabuti Limited, and Olarewaju Oniyitan, founder, WHBS Consulting. Larry holds a first-class degree in business administration and is a certified business development analyst and associate accounting technician. And last but not least, Rolake Akinkugbe is the head, Energy and Natural Resources, FBN Capital. Rolake will be moderating this policy discussion.
Brilliant. It's great to be here, ladies and gentlemen, and I've been listening to the discussion since morning, and I must say this is an issue that is especially close to my heart because recently at work we've been having quite a lot of discussion around investing in our workforce. As a banker, one of the things we always look for when it comes to investment is there has to be a criteria and there has to be a return on that investment. So I really look forward to the discussion today with our distinguished panelists, and just to save time, I think one of the things I'd like to do is in the course of the discussion ask the panelists to kind of introduce themselves through the comments. Dr. Ezedima, you've been working with UNIDO, and you've also been exposed to best practice, not just in Nigeria, presumably from across the region. Are SMEs really the solution and driver of this growth, and do they have the right skills and human capital to drive the sort of change that Katerina is alluding to?
Yes, to the first question. But the second, and that's regards SMEs. SMEs are basically drivers of growth. And we cannot avoid it. Actually, I think the challenge in Nigeria today is how to formalize the micro enterprises to become SMEs, how to grow them from micro or small. We have close to 2 million micro enterprises. We have less than 5,000 SMEs. So basically, the reason we do not go to SMEs because they are drivers of change. But when it comes to skills is something that we have failed in this country to recognize. Let me explain what I mean. We have a negative stereotype about technical and vocational educational system. And it is very glaring when somebody graduates with a PhD, we don't give him equivalent status as somebody who has a BS.
And where do you think that stereotype comes from?
And that stereotype is as a result of the fact that we took a system, specifically from the British system, which had emphasized university education, academic education, rote learning. And that had spiraled on without us changing with the times. Britain has changed, we have not changed. And if we fail to recognize the fact that technology is already in place, so many things are technology driven, it will become very difficult for us to adjust our educational system to suit the industrial needs that we want to develop. That is where the challenge lies. So developing SMEs actually relies on the fact that you first of all have to train the people who have the skills to develop. And to train those people who have the skills, you have to restructure your technical education system. And you have to also change the mindset of Nigerians to begin to think that anyone who has a vocational training skill is better than anyone who is a graduate in a university. That is the core issue here.
Mr. Amokoje, you work very closely with the Vice President of Job Creation. And if anyone knows very well, part of the challenge we've had in the country over the last decade is our expenditure when it comes to education, and particularly when you compare the proportion that is spent on